Media welcoming rally for opposition leader Raila Odinga on Friday after a 10-day trip to the United States. His supporters had planned to go and welcome him at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, plans that were not given the green light by the police. And equally, a planned rally at Uhuru Park by NASA also hit a snag after the park was surrounded by police officers who would not allow the rally to take place. And the pictures on your screen are part of the aftermath of the standoff between the police and NASA supporters. NASA leaders, on the other hand, insist that the law only requires one to inform the police of the intent to hold a rally and not to seek permission. Inspector General of Police Joseph Boynet, on the other hand, warned that taking the Million Man March to JKIA would undermine security. At least 5 people were killed on Friday in the chaos, tens were injured, and property destroyed during that confrontation.
You did not die in vain. You sacrificed your lives for the cause of democracy, as it gave you the freedom to choose your leaders and determine the direction of your country.
Kenyatta has put on notice NASA leaders following the violence, saying his government would not tolerate violence. The president says he will not allow a few people to destroy the country. Opposition leader Raila Odinga, on the other hand, says the chaotic scenes were a sign of the start of what he called Kenya's third liberation.
Sauti zetu za kisiasa tusisababishe zilete umwagikaji wa damu au chuki kati ya wananchi wa jamhuri hii yetu ya Kenya.
All right, so the question that we're asking tonight is, did it have to get to this? 5 people lost their lives, property was destroyed, a couple of people were injured. That is the conversation we're having tonight as we seek to move this country forward. This is Crossfire. Thank you for joining us. I'm Linda Ogutu. So in studio I have Edwin Sifuna, who's a lawyer, and there's a specific reason why he's part of this conversation, because he's the one who wrote the letter notifying the police on the planned rally at Uhuru Park, and indeed that meeting at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. We will also be speaking in a couple of minutes to George Msamali. He's a security expert, just to look at how the police essentially handled what happened on Friday, just to seek his mind on it. We will also be speaking to government spokesperson Eric Iraithe on phone to get his reaction, because NASA leader Raila Odinga says the police used excessive force in handling that protest on Friday. Welcome to Crossfire. So let's begin this conversation with Edwin Sifuna, who's in studio with me. Edwin, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
I've seen a letter that you wrote to the police, and yes, you were notifying them of the rally at Uhuru Park and indeed that march that was going to take place from Jomo Kenyatta all through to town. What sort of response did you get, if at all any?
First, Linda, there are 2 letters that we wrote to the police. There is an initial letter which we served them on the 15th.
Yes.
And I have to give you a bit of background, because we have been having difficulty serving these notifications to the police, because the instructions seems to be that the officers are not allowed to receive or even acknowledge receipt of the notifications. It has happened in the recent past. And so this particular letter, the first letter that we wrote and served them on the 15th, we actually did get a response from the letter of...
I saw that response on 16th,
yes, from the office, absolutely, of the Office of the Inspector General of Police, and directing us that we needed to also serve the individual police stations, the OCSs for the individual police stations, the JKIA police, Embakasi police, and also Central Police Station, under whose jurisdictions the areas that the march was going to go through fall. Oh. Now, the second letter that we wrote to the specific police stations, we never received any response. But what is interesting is...
What was the second letter saying?
Now, the second letter, we wrote that second letter after receipt of the letter on the 16th from the Inspector General of Police, the Office of the IG, directing us that we needed to serve the individual police stations, because we had taken the liberty of writing to the IG himself, because they had issued a statement earlier in the day saying that they were aware that some people were planning a march to JKIA and that they would not allow people into the airport. And I mean, the biggest problem in this country with the police right now is the preferential treatment, because as people have alluded to even on social media, Linda, you will see that this is not the first time a political leader is being received at JKIA. We receive national leaders and heroes at JKIA every day. We receive athletes who come from you know, the Olympics and other games who have brought glory to the country, and there's never a problem. When Uhuru Kenyatta came back from The Hague, I mean, they opened the airport for his supporters and they walked from the airport all the way to town. When Matiba came back, I personally remember going to receive Honorable Kibaki when he came from hospital in London in 2002, 2001, and there wasn't any problem. So the preferential treatment by police and the manner in which they dealt with the procession yesterday is something, and I believe we are now just extremely tired of just condemning these acts. We want individual police officers and the rank and file of the police to actually pay the price for what they have done to Kenyans.
Does it matter that the Inspector General of Police said he cited security concerns by allowing NASA supporters 1 million, so to speak, into Jomo Kenyatta International Airport? Well,
it is an excuse. That's what I'm saying. We have seen preferential treatment when it comes to NASA supporters. It has been done before, and the record can bear as witness that it has been done before, when Uhuru came back, when Matiba came back, when Kibaki came back. But it could make sense for you to try and restrict access to the airport because of the nature of the installation. But how do you explain all the roadblocks that were put on the roads at various junctions and junctures when the protests had already long left the airport? How do you explain police just attacking protesters? How do you explain shooting into a crowd? How do you explain shooting tear gas into vehicles? How do you explain the stoning of vehicles by police?
Okay.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
So, first of all, the police made it clear they're not going to allow your supporters into Jomo Kenyatta International Airport.
Yes.
Did they make it clear that they would also not allow the Uhuru Park rally?
No, and this is one thing that we need to also make very clear, Linda. It is not for the police to allow us to do these things. It is not for them to say we allow you. Okay. This is a new era. We live under the Constitution, which guarantees us under Article 37 that we have these rights. It is not for them to give us permission. It is for us to comply with the law, and all the law says...
Irrespective of the reasons they have?
Absolutely.
Irrespective, Sifuna, of the reasons they have?
You see, you need to understand the kind of political context that we are in, the times that we live in. These people use this so-called security for, as a pretext to deny us our rights. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's not the first rally that has been held at Uhuru Park. We have had dozens of rallies at Uhuru Park. I myself have been at Uhuru Park for rallies several times. So there is absolutely no reason whatsoever why they would deny you your right to assemble. So okay. we read politics, and given the fact that we have seen other political players having protests that were never even touched by police, we have images of people carrying pangas being escorted by police. So we know that we are treated differentially and specially because they have profiled us as opposition supporters.
Okay. I looked at what happened on Friday, and there were 2 police trucks that were burnt.
Yes.
Yeah. And someone would raise the concern. I know NASA leader Raila Odinga has said police used excessive force. But Sifuna, when police vehicles are being burnt, what other options are there?
Linda, do you know that there are police vehicles parked somewhere now? Have you seen anybody walking there and burning them? Mm-hmm. Everything must be viewed in context. Okay. Immediately you start firing at me, I will start firing back. That is just the nature of things. I mean, you make people agitated and angry, they are going to take it out on something, on someone. So were it not for the fact that we were being tear-gassed and stoned by the police and shot at, there would absolutely be no vehicles burnt. Like I've told you right now, there are vehicles, police vehicles all over the place. I can't just walk there and burn it. It doesn't make any sense. I need to get 2 things clear. One, you wrote a letter to the police. There was no communication whatsoever that they would not allow the rally. No, they did not.
And they would not allow the procession.
Absolutely. If you look at the letter from the Office of the Inspector General, all they were saying was notify the specific individual or specific police stations. Mm-hmm. If they had a problem with the procession at JKIA or or indeed the rally at Uhuru Park, then they should have used that letter to tell us that they do not allow it.
And they didn't.
And they didn't.
Okay.
It is clear from the letter itself.
This would be a good place to bring in George Msamali, who's a security expert. He's joining us from one of our studios here. George, good evening. Good to see you. So before I speak to you, I'd like to take a look at what exactly happened on Friday. Then we can have a conversation about it.
Chaotic scenes, tear gas, running battles, defiance and resistance are the events that marked the return of NASA leader Raila Odinga, who jetted back in the country on Friday morning. Chaos began immediately. Odinga landed at JKIA at 11 a.m. when his supporters were blocked from accessing JKIA, which police said would have been a security breach. From Mombasa Road, off to Likoni Road, then Jogoo Road, it was marathon running battles between NASA youth and the police. A heavy deployment of police officers attempted to block their entry into the city center, with the NASA leader leading from the front. But a seemingly battle-hardened and defiant crowd continued surging.
So that is part of a story that was done on Friday by our Duncan Haemba on Friday when Raila walked into the country and the chaos that are witnessed along several roads and the back and forth between the police and his supporters. And at this point, I'd like to bring in government spokesperson Eric Kiraithe, who's joining us on phone. Sir, good evening. Thank you for speaking to us on Crossfire. Allow me to get your response, first of all, on how the police handled what happened on Friday. Sir, can you hear me? Okay, let's see if we can get Eric Kiraithe, the government spokesperson, again on phone in a couple of minutes. But right now, let's speak to George Msamali as well. And George, I'll begin from that same point. Give me your assessment of how the police handled this whole thing.
Linda, it's very unfortunate what we witnessed on Friday. And this is something that could have been avoided with proper planning by the police. I remember a notification had been issued as it's required by law. And what the police were supposed to do, if they wanted to deny access to the airport, they could have denied access only to the airport and allowed the procession to go on or to move on into Uhuru Park as requested by the applicants. In such circumstances, I believe what police should have done, they should have worked together with the conveyors of the meeting so that they have proper security plans that will be coordinated between the conveyors of the meeting and the police. And by deploying police on the roads, because basically they said that allowing these people to get into the JKIA was going to be a breach of security, which I agree. But now we need an explanation as to why we had so many roadblocks laid along the road leading into town, yet we had not been told this group was posing a security threat in other parts of the city apart from the JKIA. So I believe the commanders that were in charge of this riot party completely mishandled the situation. They did not appreciate the situation. In such circumstances, you go out there, look at what is on the ground, make a proper appreciation of the situation, and come up with a proper plan on how to deal with the situation at hand. I believe this did not happen, and that is why you saw a lot of chaos, police using live bullets on protesters, tear gas being lobbied at people anyhowly, and at the end of the day, you'll find that we lost lives and property was damaged.
Edwin Sifuna is here in studio with me. Edwin, was that option even available? Just let's sit down and look at your routes and work on this. How can we do this best?
Actually, that option was never there on the table because, as I've told you, the police have decided to deal with NASA supporter, the coalition as a whole, as if we are lepers, as if we are not Kenyans, as if we do not have full rights. And what is interesting is, Linda, we actually had gotten to a place where we thought we had defined the law and the practice regarding protests in this country, because you will remember that we have gone to court on the issue of the exercise of Article 37 more than a dozen times. And even the High Court has weighed in on the responsibilities of the organizers of such protests and marches and the responsibilities of the police. And I remember one time after one of those decisions, the police showed some level of interest in such organization. And we, as the NASA coalition, even went forward to recruit marshals and to train them. And at some point, they used to request us to forward to them the names of the marshals so that those particular protests, or those specific protests, would actually be conducted peacefully. And if you remember, the last protest for the ejection of the then IEBC commissioners, it went on without any drama. But we have seen, ever since the election, there has been a change of heart by the police, and I blame the leadership, because it is clear that they are intent on subverting the law. They are intent on, they are receiving certain orders to try and crush the opposition. But, one of the things that I know is that we are very resilient as a people and as a movement. We are not going to be cowed by the things that you see happening today. The law will never defend itself. You have to stand up and defend the law. You have to stand up and defend the Constitution. It's quite unfortunate, Linda, watching the events that I was watching on Friday outside the country. It breaks your heart when you're seated there. We were seated there with lawyers from places that we think are worse than us, like Uganda and even Rwanda. And they were wondering what was going on. They could not believe that was Kenya. I was ashamed and embarrassed for the country.
That was several hours of running battles. Msamali, an operation like this most definitely will have a lot of planning from the police. Looking at how they handled the whole day, how they handled the protesters and the running battles back and forth along the roads, what is this one thing that you think they could have done differently, and maybe we wouldn't even be having this conversation?
Linda, as I've said earlier, what needs to happen is the commander going out there. Yes, they said that the procession was illegal, according to them. But if you look at the numbers of people that were there, a commander is supposed to make a proper appreciation. And he should have advised his bosses. We are facing a situation whereby we have so many people here, and if we don't handle this properly, then automatically we're going to lose lives, property is going to be damaged. And I think the police did not plan for this particular operation. The reason why I'm saying this is that we saw a cocktail of units, police units, working together, yet they have not been trained together. You will find that we had the GSU there, we had the AP, we had the regular police. At some point, I even saw prison officers there. These people have never been trained together, and handling such a situation needs proper training and proper coordination. And if the commanders had appreciated the situation properly, what they could have done is they could have very quickly changed their mindset, because they had gone there saying that we're going to stop this. But looking at the situation on the ground, you make an appreciation, you say, this is not how we are going to handle this. Change your operational plan and say, let us escort these people peacefully to where they want to go. And only that, we must only make sure that they don't behave in a manner such as will be a breach of peace, and also no property should be damaged. They should have talked to the organizers and told them, now, you are here, where are you people headed to? And then they should have blocked some roads to allow the procession to go on peacefully, and then after that, request these people to disperse, because you need to appreciate the situation, not just going there because you've been told, stop the procession, you decide to do it at whatever cost.
Msamali, though, before we speak to government spokesperson Eric Raitha in about 30 seconds, the flip side of this, someone would argue, is that you would create a citizenry that does not respect the rule of law. The police are on record, they're saying we will not allow this. So when you say they should have gone there and probably just done a survey and decided, okay, let's let this go on, then what happens to the rule of law?
Linda, it's not the first time this has happened. Remember, let me give you a situation whereby you've gone to places like Kapedo, you're going to deal with rustlers.
Yeah.
You have a platoon of 32 officers, and then the rustlers come like 200 of them armed. Do you fight because these guys are breaking the law? That's why I've said you need to appreciate the situation. Yes, they could be breaking the law, but there's a better way of dealing with this. Instead of using force where you know force cannot work. Yes, they tried to stop the procession, but what happened eventually? The crowds had their way. Yeah? If they had done this properly, appreciated and talked to the organizers, I think this could have been handled in a more orderly manner than what we witnessed. So I'm not saying that citizens should be allowed to break the law, but at some point as a policeman, you need to know what kind of situation you are in and then come up with a proper way of handling the situation.
Msamali, stay with me. I'd like to speak to Eric Raitha, he's the government spokesperson. Sir, good evening. Can you hear me?
Hear you.
All right, good evening. Thank you for speaking to us on Crossfire this evening. First of all, sir, I'd like to get a reaction on how the police handled the protests that were witnessed on Friday with the coming in of NASA leader Raila Odinga.
Well, I must first of all say that tonight I'm feeling a bit ambushed. But before we even go to how the police handled this thing, we need to address a few issues and which are going missing in your discussion.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm low on battery and I will not be able to talk a lot. So I would want to go straight to a few fundamentals there. As a government, we appreciate that NASA are suffering post-traumatic stress disorder occasioned by a situation they have willingly mishandled. They have a lot of trauma. They mishandled the opportunity to go back for a rerun in elections, but that is past what we are saying. The next thing we must appreciate is that NASA have gone extra-constitutional. When you sit back and say that you are doing a resistance movement, you put even the security services in a spin. There isn't a single chapter in our constitution talking about resistance movement. And I am saying this duly aware that there is nothing, no weapon more dangerous than a political bigot armed with one phrase in the Constitution, not even our section, one phrase in the Constitution. Then I'll move fast forward and tell you that I looked at a lot of scenes and I saw a lot of policemen who turned out on this occasion unarmed, without firearms, telling you that there was every good intention among the police to ensure that law and order is enforced without recourse to use of excessive force. And we must give it to the Inspector General, because it is a first in this country where police officers go to a riot without the benefit of firearms. Then we must also look at what did NASA say. I heard people like my friend Miguna swearing that they will bring 1 million people into the airport. That is illiteracy of the worst kind, because assume that you are just arriving in an airport in South Africa or in London, and you see the kind of crowd, because basically what we must accept, and this is a fact which does not need any justification, a group of people armed with stones. Did we see stones? The answer is yes. Did we see these slings? The answer is yes. If you meet that kind of crowd in an airport, and when I'm saying this, I'll remind you that in 2014, I was in charge of the airport, and I am the one who allowed Raila Odinga to be welcomed to the airport. And therefore, we are not talking about theory. If you are an Inspector General and somebody told you that he is assembling what, in every reasonable respect, is a team of goons and petty thieves in the airport, what decisions would you have made in the circumstances? And therefore, we are putting our law enforcement in a very difficult situation. We are suspending the rule of law, the responsibility for following the word and letter of the Constitution from page 1 to the last page, and looking for opportunities to blame the police. What I would tell you that is, as a government, we want this country to be united. We don't want to focus on who is flying out and who is flying in. We have a Vision 2030 done by the entire country, looking at why are we not a fast-growing economy providing quality services to our citizens. As a government, we want to focus people on things that add value to our lives, not a canon which cannot be described in terms of dimension. We want to tell people it is possible to pay 700 shillings from Mombasa. It is possible to come from Mayale to the city center in a day. And therefore, I am running out of credit. God bless you, but let us unite Kenya. Thank you.
Government spokesperson Eric Raithe, thank you so much for speaking to us on Crossfire. I'll get the reaction of Edwin Sifuna and, of course, George Msamali. Just for purposes of this conversation, it would also be important for me to mention that we also were expecting to have Kakai Kissinger, who's also a lawyer, to be part of this conversation. However, he's not been able to make it up to now. So allow me to take a break, then we'll get the reactions on what government spokesperson Eric Raithe has just had to say.